Craving Sugar. For anyone here who is fairly new to going low oxalate, one of the things that many of us see in the first, going to say, depends on the person, could be 6 to 12 months, is appetite dysregulation and potentially craving things, especially sugary things, because your satiation hormones look like they get affected by oxalate. I cannot find research to verify this. This is fully anecdotal, but I noticed it for myself as well. There were times when I would eat a whole meal, I'd think I was full, and then 15 minutes later, I'd kind of discover myself looking in cupboards to see if something looked interesting. And it was this issue with appetite where I couldn't get full. And I've heard parents talk like this about their kids. I've heard adults talk like this about their own oxalate journey. So there is something about oxalate which looks like it messes with our satiation hormones, and this is not unusual. So sugar craving or other kinds of cravings are pretty common, okay? Pretty common. What I would add to that is the only research I have found which shows a direct, I'm going to say entanglement because I don't know how to characterize it, but an entanglement between hormones and oxalate has to do with some of the sex hormones. And interestingly enough, for women, if your estrogen is dropping, you are more likely to move oxalate. So if you, like me, found this when you were in your perimenopause years, I think I know why. So for a lot of us, interestingly enough, estrogen levels will protect you from some of the effects of oxalate. I think testosterone may have the same benefit in men. And so you don't have the same, I'm going to say, pattern that women develop, where if they're a menstruating woman, they might start to see a regular oxalate dump when their hormones do some of the up and down. But just one of those things where I think it might explain why, for many of us, tissues that are sensitive to sex hormones may also be tissues where oxalate is being preferentially stored. And so just one of those things for us to keep in mind. So a lot of the men in my practice have had issues with prostate. A lot of the women in my practice have either had issues with breast pain, which can be microcalcifications, or have had issues with their menstruation or vulvodynia and things like that. So we've got kind of a playing field that looks like there's a lot more entanglement in these areas than I've been able to find clear research on. But stay tuned, and in the meantime, we will share these kinds of anecdotal things so that people can be aware. Now, if you're having sugar cravings and you go to my favorite, which is white chocolate, from an oxalate standpoint, that's zero oxalate. Is it a health food? No, I can't claim that it's a health food. But for some of us, it helps us get over that initial sense of deprivation. Like, I remember kind of grieving my old diet, and I think many of us have to do that. And so if this is a tool that you can start out with, is it perfect? Maybe not, but it's not a terrible option when you're not adding a lot to your oxalate load when you're doing this. So what I did at the time when I realized I was starting to put on a few pounds after I was on my low oxalate journey, I actually looked for a sugar-free white chocolate. I think it's still on the market. I think Lily is the brand. That's in North America, but I'm hoping that maybe one of our wonderful Europeans might be able to find something over there. But it is using erythritol for its sweetener, so you're not getting the big sugar impact. The cocoa butter, which they use to make white chocolate, is still giving you some of the benefits of that saturated fat. So it becomes not such a bad option. So I would say if you're craving something sweet, there's lots of low oxalate alternatives in terms of what you can use to make something sweet. There's allulose, which is a new one on the market. It's a natural sugar that's found in foods, but obviously they've concentrated it, so you've got a lot more of it. Erythritol is also a natural sugar that you can find in foods. Again, they're giving it to you purified. Sometimes they add some monk fruit extract. It's got a very nice, pleasant sweet. Allulose actually works a little bit like a GLP-1. So for those of you who are been watching all the hysteria over Ozempic and all these other drugs, you can actually get some appetite suppression from allulose. I'll warn you though, I personally found that if I had a little bit too much of it, my stomach would be very upset. It would not just suppress my appetite. I would be like, done. So use some of these things with caution. And if you occasionally need a little bit of sugar, please know also that early in the journey, because oxalate's disrupting the mitochondria, and if you've got a lot of oxalate moving, moving and your cells are dealing with a lot of it, you can kind of hit like an energy wall where all of a sudden they're not able to produce energy, and all of a sudden you're like completely fatigued and have nothing. Now, some of that can be histamine. It can be very confusing in the beginning, but if you're hitting like an energy wall, a little bit of natural sugar from something healthy like a fruit or whatever is not the end of the world. And from something like white chocolate, because otherwise you might go out and do something which would be much worse for you, not the end of the world.
Also for your nervous system, right?
If you feel like you've
You
taken care
need
of
that.
yourself a little bit, yeah,
Yeah.
your nervous system might be happier too.
You need a
You
little
had a
bit.
little treat. You said, "Okay, you've done a really good job today. Let's have a little goodie."